Magento Evangelist, Mr. Marks.
I find myself once more in Japan. I never mind coming to visit Japan, even though it always seems, Nishi-san, that this event is like the day after some other event somewhere else in the world. But it's okay, because it's a reminder to me that there is quite a lot of Magento happening in quite a lot of places around the world. As I often do, I'll give you my contact information first. You should always feel welcome to use it. Even if you need to write to me in Japanese, I can use Google Translate with the best of them. I got experience as a developer using Google, right? So yeah, just ben@magento.com. I'm on Twitter, I'm online. If you want to suggest any other social networks to reach me, I'm more than happy to sign up for those too. I'm going to have like a part 2 of my business card though. The more places I go, the more networks I have to be a part of. So I wanted to talk to us about the Magento 2.2 experience today. We recently announced our sort of the 10th anniversary of Magento 1 being released in beta. So over 10 years ago, this magical journey that is Magento started, which for me is very interesting to think about. Today, over $124 billion, billion with a B, of global merchandise volume is enabled by Magento code. And that's not our number, that's actually analyst numbers. The same analysts tell us that 60 million customers around the world interact with a Magento instance in the course of a year. But most importantly, they tell us that the Magento economy, the economy of being in the business of Magento. So folks like Hiro and his wife, you guys, the work you're doing, the employees that you have, that entire economy is $5 billion. It's a lot of people's future plans. For some of us, it's the stores that you're running. This business that we're in touches a lot of lives. And so it's very important that we as a company both execute on good product strategy and that we listen and respond to the feedback that you have for us. Now, part of that, executing on good product strategy, brings me to the release of Magento 2.2. And I will say what a release it is. We have, with Magento 2.2 now, native business-to-business functionality. I'll go into that a little bit, and I'll also mention why it's so important. Along with that, we have business-to-business, our business intelligence, our Magento-specific analytics platform. You saw my colleague Dane talk about that earlier. We have specific dashboards and measurements for B2B. We also have Magento Commerce Starter, and we also launched bundled extensions. I can actually talk about these two first. Commerce Starter is actually our cloud product. You may not know this, but Magento really now considers itself to be a cloud company. So we have a solution, and I have a couple slides on it later. We have a solution where you can actually go to our website right now and sign up. And then in about 15 or 20 minutes, you have a fully provisioned Magento Commerce instance running in our data center. And bundled in with this is our CDN, some performance and debugging tools. several vendors worth of technology bundled into one place where you can just have to deal with Magento, right? So what used to be having to go to 4 or 5 different vendors is now all in one place. But anyway, you can sign up for that online. It exists today. And our bundled extensions, this is actually the beginning of a very important era for Magento where we're able to pull more and more things out of the core, and then you only have to include what you need. So we're getting towards a vision down the road where, here in Japan, if you want to, if you're a merchant, you want to test out Magento, or if you're an agency and you want to demo Magento for a merchant, that you're not going to have to skip over like U.S. postal configurations, etc. Try and make this thing seem more native wherever it goes in the world. All right, so that's a little bit on Starter. It's a little bit on bundled extensions. So getting into B2B. B2B is absolutely where the growth is. I mean, we see economies, especially here in Asia Pacific, growing bigger and bigger, and that's both in B2C and in B2B. But if you look at the growth rate, business to business is where the growth is truly explosive. Now, Magento is in an interesting position when it comes to B2B because we're already leaders in the B2B space. I like that as a developer, or maybe I should say almost former developer, because it shows how adaptable Magento is as a platform. Now, if you are a developer in here who has taken Magento in the past and adapted it to a B2B use case, there is a lot of work to do because there are some fundamental assumptions baked into the core as to it being a B2C application. But enough people needed the flexibility that Magento offered, and they knew the application well enough that they were able to adapt Magento to the B2B space, and consequently we became a leader among many of the analysts and market research firms without even trying. Right? So we have a number of brands and logos that we can throw up, successful B2B stories. Now, of course, these aren't just Magento stories. This is Magento working through some great partners. The one real standout here, I think, is Liebherr, right? Very complicated catalog in Germany, one of the largest companies, running on Magento's B2B platform before it was even actually officially released. And I like that example because that was born out of how we created the B2B, sort of the B2B set of features in the first place. We went to all of these people who had already been taking Magento and adapting it to the B2B space. We went to them and we just said, hey, what are your recommendations? What are the challenges for adapting Magento to this use case? What are the common requirements? What can we build as just part of table stakes? And then what do you need room for customization on most frequently? And so we did. We had this cadre of people who've been doing this with Magento for years. They were our advisors on the product. And then once we actually got it put together, we went back to them and they told us, yeah, you got it right. You basically, it's a bootstrap for getting B2B up and running. And when it needs to be extended, and it always does, because there are always a host of integrations for B2B projects, we did it right. We covered the whole thing in a RESTful API. So, when it comes to some other numbers, Magento, yeah, we have way more B2B in the IR, so the internet retailer, top 300, a sixth of them are ours already. I'm not saying that other platforms are bad. I'm just saying that Magento, being as flexible as it is, in the hands of capable integrators, it's able to fit a lot of use cases and do so, I think, in a really cost-efficient way. So, what did we do when we actually said, "Hey, we're going to come out with a table stakes level of B2B functionality"? Well, we wanted to do some of the standard things that you need in B2B, like having company-based accounts where you have people with multiple roles inside an organization, the ability to visualize and arrange an organization. So if I am maybe a business manager, I can set up the employees who have access to this B2B vendor I use, and I can set what kind of things they can do, how much they can order before they need to bump it over to someone else with a higher approval level, for example, right? So that becomes kind of that's a standard request in most B2B builds. Also, we provide the ability to sort of view and manage credit in the front end and look at the overall account history. We wanted to reduce friction for ordering because a lot of B2B transactions, you know what you need. You know, it's a list of things, it's a list of supplies that you have. A lot of people these days are still, you know, they might print out an email, fill some stuff in, and fax it back to a place where it'll be processed. It's like one of our stretch goals to maybe eliminate fax machines forever in this space, if we could do that. So being able to upload a CSV or a spreadsheet of SKUs for ordering, being able to create requisition lists, and then also even enabling punch-out systems. So you may have some products from some vendors that they have an entire e-procurement system. So the order just passes through and places the order inside that e-procurement system. All of that's possible out of the box. Another important thing for B2B, it very often, depending on the vertical, you may have negotiated quotes, right? So you may have people going back and forth saying, well, you know what, we need 50 of these, but what kind of price break can you give me at 100? And maybe a customer service rep and an inside rep can say, well, you know, if you can bump it up to 100, we'll give you a 10% price break. And the ability to track what's been quoted, the negotiations that have happened, so that any time that customer is contacting the business can look and see, okay, well, here's what we've done in the past, and here's where we are currently. So that way you have a sort of a unified front, a consistent voice when you're trying to keep your customer happy, to keep them purchasing. And of course, there's the merchandising aspect, because we're introducing a whole new dimension. It's not just about my business to one customer. It's about my business to an entire business's customer. And maybe there are other dimensions there. Maybe I have some customer service reps, I have some account reps, and they're responsible for a territory. And in that territory, only certain products are available. Well, you have all of these additional dimensions available to you for merchandising in the B2B space. And then, through the magic of the community, we're bringing online the concept of multi-stock. This is the ability to track stock against multiple warehouses and to have requests that automatically fill from the appropriate warehouse based on whatever rules you have. Because right now in Magento, previously in Magento, you had just one homogeneous stock. There was no sense of where it could be located, but the reality these days, you know, what has been called omnichannel becomes kind of increasingly normal. And so what we realize is that people have, they have stock in different brick and mortar stores. They may have stock in different warehouses. And especially if you're multinational, you're going to want to have stock likely adjacent, in the country where your customer is buying from. So we built this into B2B as well, and it's actually, this capability is going to be enhanced greatly by a community-driven product that should be out, I think, in Q2 of next year. That'll really give some power and granularity to this. And then finally, just on B2B features themselves, the ability to extend credit. So inside Magento, you can say, all right, hey, this company, they can place orders up to these values, and we'll service those orders. And you could actually, I believe, even have them go over. You can become kind of a clearinghouse of your own for some of your better customers that you trust. And then, of course, because we have our our business intelligence platform, it made sense to look at the kinds of information that are important for a B2B operation. So we have dashboards, 100 out-of-the-box B2B reports, which are built from the experience that we have working with B2B merchants. So among these lists, right, looking at that journey, that customer journey of going from the quote to the order. If you have KPIs for your sales reps, like how are they performing against your expectations of them as a business? Being able to look at a company in the system and say, you know, hey, they just get a heads up alert. They're kind of falling off. You know, their orders are down 20% year over year, quarter over quarter, and these are all just there, just waiting for you when you use this. Now, another thing to point out, and I don't know that we even do this as well as we should. The data that are sort of aggregated and rendered meaningful inside of Magento Business Intelligence, they're not locked into that system, right? And this is I think especially important in the B2B world, because very often you have an entire enterprise service bus and ERPs and other systems that are all being driven by the sales data. You can grab this data out of MBI and you can feed that back into your other systems, right? And again, that's all via RESTful API. So I like it. We've taken, in a year, we've taken MBI and really integrated it into the full suite of products that we have. And that brings me back to Magento Cloud. So, how do you get Magento B2B features? Well, you buy the Magento Commerce platform, right? We had a bit of a rebranding recently. What was called Magento Enterprise Edition is now just Magento Commerce. What was called Magento Community Edition is now just called Magento Open Source, kind of representing a little bit more how we want the different markets that tend to use those platforms. It's still true, though, that Magento Open Source is the core of our enterprise product, Magento Commerce. And then when you have Magento Commerce in the cloud, well, all that is just a platform as a service, a PaaS environment around Magento Commerce product, right? So a strategy to consider is standing up Magento Cloud instance, because we handle a lot of those infrastructure concerns. And then that's the bootstrap for your business-to-business development. But Magento is still always built to be run on-prem as well, so you can be on-premises with it. If you have a need, either that we can't accommodate, or maybe a legal requirement, or any other requirement that really means you need to control you need to control the environment in which Magento is running, you absolutely can still run Magento Commerce on site. If you do run with us, like I mentioned, we have CDN through Fastly, CDN vendor. We have reliable and scalable hosting. So we're ultimately deploying through AWS. We actually have a partner between us and AWS. They're the ones who that actually make developers' lives a little bit easier, because you have these wonderful just Git-based. So if you're not a developer, just close your ears right now. They have just Git-based. Make a branch, and bam, you can spin up an environment. I am painting quite a rosy picture of it. It's still a young product. If you have some specific questions, I can actually refer you to Joshua and Jenna, because they've been working with Magento Cloud teams since darn near the beginning, and have watched it, go through its early day growing pains. So I would encourage you to reach out to them if you have any questions. And then finally, it just should be pointed out that the whole system is designed to be extended, right? We know that whereas commerce is always custom, business-to-business commerce is even more so, and the integrations tend to be even broader, deeper. And so we built this to be extended. And that brings me to, I think, what is it, the third half of my presentation. This is getting a little bit more developer-y here. Translate developer-y, but I'm sure Ueno-san is doing a good job. So security updates. We have well, of course, we have a pretty healthy bug bounty program. We will pay you up to $10,000 for vulnerabilities properly disclosed through BugCrowd. We actually believe that open source is very secure, because guess what? It's out there. All that source code is out there, and people spend a lot of time trying to hack this stuff, and they make a good career out of it. So among the things that we've patched, the biggest surface area that we had to cover this time with this release was getting rid of those unserialized calls, right? We also handled some cross-site scripting issues. And then we have our upgraded tech stack. PHP 5.6 is gone. Varnish 3, Solar, both gone. We've added support for PHP 7.1. We added support for Varnish 5, and Redis 3.2, and MySQL 5.7, which Nishi-san was actually telling me is in fact necessary if you want to do search and you're using kanji characters. Is that a good way of saying it? You can even mention it in Japanese.
そうですね。これ日本語で説明するんですけども、MySQL 5.7 で、全文検索のインデックスに N グラムとかメカブが使えるようになったんですけども、Magento 2って基本的に全文検索にマッチアゲンスト、like じゃなくて全文検索の項目を使うので、日本語が当たらないというですね、切ない現実が待っていると。なので 5.7 でないと結構ちゃんと当たらないという悲しい現実が待っています。
はい、ありがとうございます。And then, another good one, pipeline deployment. So, how you deploy Magento 2 is more involved than like deploying Magento 1. We just have, because of the compilation that we're doing, because we want to have the application, we want to do a lot of the heavy lifting for the application just once, compile some things, materialize some things, get them where they need to go, and then the application can just sing in production. There were several steps to this, and we never really had, we didn't have I think as formally architected, we never formally architected those steps and how they run. And then there were just a couple of corners in there that could really throw you off. So we have this deployment pipeline concept. It's well documented in DevDocs. And by the way, the release notes for Magento 2.2 were also there in DevDocs, and they go into each of these points in more detail. So I have the early stories that I've heard from 2.2 deployments are people have gotten even multi-language deployments of sites down to sub-minute range. So we're definitely headed in the right direction there. And then some performance improvements related to improving cache hits. It no longer should be apparent if you're running like an indexing job behind the scenes. It shouldn't be slowing down the catalog. And again, there's some more details in our dev docs. And that brings me to a couple more developer notes. So we went through a pretty rigorous release candidate process. So multiple previews. And for our partners, we have been investing heavily in automation, test automation. So we are running, I don't know how many permutations, but it's quite a lot. When we were packing up these releases to make sure that we're not breaking things that were working. We also execute a number of manual tests, almost 3,000 manual tests, again, just to ensure quality. The quality story is way up, thank goodness, as Magento 2 becomes a more mature product. This number is actually going to go down as we continue to automate things. And then we will, of course, be making that stuff available to you. And you'll be able to build wonderful things off of our MFTF, as was mentioned earlier. We dropped by 4/5 the use of private methods. We were essentially trying to make make the application as extensible as possible. And related to that, we increased the number of API endpoints by a factor of 4. We still have a ways to go, but that's really good. That's a pretty healthy improvement. That just means that there's 4 times more. There are 4 times more points which you, as a third-party developer, can rely on to just be completely immutable for the remainder of Magento 2. All in all, Magento 2.2 includes 400 fixes and enhancements. And that's thanks in large part to over 500 community contributors. Community contribution at Magento has been, I think, the emerging big headline story this year. In February, we took the lead, the manager of the Magento 2 development project, and we put him in a corner and had him grab 4 of his best and brightest, the architects, and that became our community engineering team. His name is Marks氏はThere is no possible translation of that to Japanese, I'm pretty sure. I never would have thought I'd have to learn this many Ukrainian surnames in my lifetime. But Max and his team, they now run the entire repository. So even the core developers have to go through his team. What they do is they groom and they triage everything that's happening on GitHub, looking at issues, looking at enhancements, leading custom dev projects. And we had an initiative this October. October is the time of year that GitHub has a big, get involved in open source initiative. We did the same thing. And it's funny, when we made this slide, which was pretty well into October, we had 200 pull requests. What a pull request is, if you don't know, it is essentially some external developer saying, hey, this problem that you have or this little feature that you need, I've got it built over here, so just pull my code into your repository. Well, it's actually almost 400 that we got just in October, and the number of unique contributors, I believe, jumped up over 100. And all we had to do was say, hey, if you get 3 PRs merged in a month, we'll give you a t-shirt. It's amazing what people will do for a t-shirt. I got a credit card because they gave me a free t-shirt. I was college, I was young, I needed the credit. It's just an example, right? It's just an example of us finally enabling our developers, our wonderful developer community, to contribute, to really empower them to contribute. And the real story here, the real story, is that this year, just since February, 20%, over 20% of the new code that is in Magento now was written by you, by the community. And that percentage is going to grow to 50% next year. I bet you. Related to our open source engagement, we have the Innovation Lab. This was a project that came out of the Strategy and Growth team, which I am a member. This is my little baby. And this is a chance, if you are doing anything interesting with Magento, it has to exist, but it doesn't have to be like finished. In fact, we're excluding anything that's an actual tech product. If it's a product that you've already stood up, you can talk to our tech partnership team. But if it's just something you've hacked together in a weekend, like, making a light bulb flash when an order comes through, or building a chatbot integration with Facebook and a Magento 2 instance. That happened earlier this year in Germany at a hackathon. Or someone like Tom Robertshaw, who built an Alexa integration, and there's a great video of him saying, hey, Alexa, where's my order? And Alexa tells him where his order is. There's even someone sitting in this room who got the bright idea that the whole Amazon one-click patent was expiring. And so he had his team, the day that expired, Joshua and his team of creativity, they had a pull request sent straight away to Magento to add one touch ordering to Magento. These are the kinds of innovations. If you're doing anything with augmented reality, virtual reality, IoT, whatever it is, we're really curious to hear about it. And we will, we'll promote that. We find it to be very inspiring to us, and we find that it inspires others if they just know about it. So if you have any innovations, please do send them my way. And I'll give you one more thing, just because it's not all about what we can get from you. I spent a good 80 hours of my life in the last month translating Ukringlish for the PHP Architect magazine. PHP Architect is like it's the PHP periodical. I mean, when I was first started out in development, over 15 years ago. Gosh. I used to basically wait by the mailbox for PHP Architect to show up. Fortunately now you can still get it in print, and it's a very lovely printed magazine. But you can also get it by PDF. Well, it's free this month, and Magento took over it, right? So we have 4 articles from our architects in here, and when you read them, and they're very readable and clear and distinct. Just remember there was someone behind that. And there's also some regular columns in there as well, but they're all themed on Magento. So that's there for you, and you can find that over at phpart.com. This group also puts on a couple of events in the U.S., PHP events, both PHP Tech and PHP World. The latter of which is happening like right now. But I skipped that because you know why? Because of you. I wanted to be here. And that's all I got. So that's Magento 2.2. It is showing us the trajectory of where we are headed. It's a great place to be right now, this time of year. And I'm very excited for 2.3. We're going to see several more product innovations coming in, along with a lot more community contributions. But if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. Feel free to ask actually in Japanese if you like, and someone will translate for me.
はい。ということでですね、ちょっと時間が早いので、たっぷり質問時間が取れます。今日ここでしか聞けないことって結構あるので、ご質問ある方、ぜひいろいろ聞いてください。日本語でもちろん OK です。親何もない。親何もない。
We'll always get one.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm wondering if your Magento Commerce supports China region, because our biggest market is China.
So, man, it's almost like I'm paying you to ask this question, which is. So, does Magento support China region? Out of the box, we're not so great at it because you know what? I'm sure you know, out of the box, it's a very American product. It is. I mean, and it's true even here in Japan. I mean, we've had conversations along this. I swear, it's been about a year now, but I swear I'm going to have up and running this what we call functional localization. Because I think for us, for a long time, we thought it was great that you could just have, you can translate, right? I can change words in the interface, but that's not enough.
Yeah, that's not enough because the biggest problem is the connection from China. And if we use a Magento Commerce, the infrastructure server system is based on the AWS, and so AWS is not reached from China.
Right. So like our cloud solution does not work for China. I think we can get kind of close to the whole, close by in Hong Kong, but it's my understanding that we have been talking with providers actually in China, because it's more than even just availability regions. There's also data privacy concerns there, and of course now in Europe. So from an infrastructure standpoint, if you want it to be like Magento Commerce Cloud, then that's something I'm happy to talk about, happy to keep you informed on, like how that's developing. But as far as the software itself goes, I can tell you we do have a team from China working on a version of Magento for the Chinese market. Because we need to do things, we need to change things. Fundamentally in Magento, we assume that a customer is going to be identified by an email address. And this really doesn't translate well to the Chinese market, right? So I mean, actually, that has broader reaching implications, because what do you do then with all the transactional information, order updates, shipping updates, etc., even marketing? Well, that needs to go out over SMS, or you need to do something through WeChat. So we do have these discussions regularly. We are in regular discussions with WeChat, with Alibaba, and we are working to make, essentially, you should be able to take Magento and say, okay, hey Magento, this is your Chinese Magento right now, and then that just the basic demo experience at that point should feel correct for a Chinese consumer walking through, or for a Chinese admin, looking at trying to service those orders and do the merchandising. So for the Chinese market, we're just working with a team to help us do that, mainly because of the amount of work and the knowledge involved. More broadly, this bundled extension approach that I mentioned earlier was an important step in us. Again, we're pulling things out of the core so that we can give you, if you want Magento in Thailand, if you want Magento in Vietnam, if you want Magento in South Africa, if you want Magento anywhere, that you should be able to say, okay, I'm getting Magento at this version, but I'm getting it at this version and for these different contexts. And then it should then bundle in both core behavioral changes. Like in Japan here, you would need the 2 fields, right, for every for the customer information, the checkout. These are just not even a concept in Magento's core. In Germany, they have to use regex to split out the house number because the house number and the postcode are actually a unique identifier. Of course, the Germans would have things that well organized, right? But in the typical Magento experience, that is just one, the house number and the street or an address line because that's how it works in America, right? So we're not trying to be commercial imperialists. It was built sort of with this American idea, and that just kind of stuck. But we're unsticking that now. And then the next step of the effort, the longer tail there, is for us to enable, for each market, for us to enable, in the way that we've enabled contributions for our core, we were also enabling contributions for regions. And it's my goal by the end of next year to actually have people, have someone responsible. I mean, if it's as simple as you can do it as like homogeneous as like one market as a country, have someone or maybe a couple someones who are responsible for making the Magento version for that market. That's kind of a stretch goal for me next year. But I'm going to do my best to do it, and I'm going to be spending a lot of time in Asia making that work. Because if we can figure this out, how to both set this up internally and enable and encourage contributions here in Asia, I think it's going to be very easy for us to do it everywhere else in the world.
Yes, thank you. And then it's also related to localization. And then how can we deal with the importing duty for each country? Because it's not easy to investigate the importing duty per country. So the solution?
So you're asking, well, let me make sure I'm understanding correctly. You're asking about how you can handle import duties?
Yeah,
like the tax for importing something into a country?
Yeah, we want to achieve DDP. It's we want to show the product price, including importing duty. So in order to do that, we need to investigate how much tax is imposed to each product.
Sure. Well, so I can. There probably are people in this room who can give you hey, we did this. Like they can give you their experience. But I'll tell you the way Magento works. You're going to, well, you need a data source, right? And you need to understand, maybe those taxes are based on the type of product, and even where it originates, right? So assuming you have just that data source, you can build in. Now, if these are prices that you need to display to customers as they're shopping, you have to decide: is it something that I can display without customer context, or can I know that this user maybe is in the U.S. store? We are, I know that the product's going to originate from China, and I know that there's going to be some kind of tax involved. You need to either build this into price indexation, right? If you need to show it to the customer before, or if it can wait, if you can actually show it as a calculated total, just as part of the checkout flow, it's very, I mean, Magento is built, you can add on what are called totals collectors, total types, right? And so you can, all you do is you just sort of register a new totals calculator.
So tax is including a product page price. So we are always showing a product price including a tax.
Okay.
Yes.
So if you're, yeah, so you need the data source, and that data source has to be part of product indexation.
Yeah, indexation.
Yeah. And that's, and there are, you know, thousands of people in thousands of stores have solved this problem. It just comes down to, how you assemble this data.
Yeah.
And how you assemble this data, how regularly it is updated or changed. I mean, I know I can give you some examples from, like, certainly from the U.S. market perspective. There are, because we have varying taxes by state. A lot of people will just hook into a third-party service that is responsible, and in fact takes the financial risk of getting that wrong, right? So not only are they trying to provide you with the correct data, but that they're also sort of mitigating the risk of if you calculate it wrong and then the tax man comes. But we also have because the U.S. occasionally does things in a way that I think is not the smartest, you know, we're that wonderful country where you go to buy something and you've got the prices all in your hand, and then you go to the register and then the tax is added, right? So we don't have that same issue of having to show the tax right there in the product listing, right? So they're able to hook in basically as part of the checkout calculation. But, you know, because price indexation is a managed process inside Magento, all you have to do is make sure that you have a system for keeping the duties related to a specific product updated and then included when that index runs.
Yeah, so because I investigated the third-party modules, and maybe TaxJar is good, but TaxJar is just only supporting the US and Canada and EU, and it doesn't support Asia region, right?
That would sound correct. That's my former boss, Ryan Thompson. That's one of those companies. I can give him shit about that later. Come on, dude, get it. You know, it's very risky for them to get into a market they don't understand. It's also a great business opportunity if someone wants to get into that. That would be valuable.
Okay, thank you.
Cheers. I think I always hate being the last guy between, you know, everyone and drinks, so.
This is my question.
Yeah.
So from Magento 2.2 has a pipeline deployment. Which do you think better, using pipeline deployment or as a deployment tool? Like David Algar's Magento 2 and Capstone?
Yeah. Okay, so that's. Well, I would say at this point, it's very much a matter of preference and experience. So pipeline, this pipeline deployment in Magento 2.2 it's very new. It's here in 2.2, and there are several people in the community who had solved, you know, managing deployments. Now with 2.2, we did make some parts of that deployment because part of deployment is sort of calculating and materializing files and so forth. And we did make that faster. But, you know, I think right now, if you have a preference or if you have tooling set up, continue to use that. But I would say look at that in the context of 2.2. Maybe when you upgrade to 2.2, those efficiencies in some of those areas will just make what you have faster. Or you may also, it may be the time to look at this new deployment architecture and see if you can build something smarter and faster, more nimble. But what I also would say is it might even be worth, if it's working for you well enough now, I would predict, in a couple months, like after the madness of 11/11's happened, certainly in the West after the Black Friday, Cyber Monday happened. I think around January you're going to start seeing some people essentially wielding our deployment pipeline expertly, and we'll have a lot of their experience there as well. So right now, a matter of style and existing tooling would be my best advice. Now, and offered as someone who was thankfully always able to defer things like that to my DevOps group.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
他ないでしょうか。Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you all, I think, very much. Yes. Okay.